This is a spoiler cast, deep dive into the Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves movie. If you haven't seen the movie yet, consider this your spoiler warning. 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to this very special edition of the Eldritch Lorecast, the #1 movie review podcast in all the spheres. That's right, we're spreading out like a gelatinous cube. We are gelatinous, that's what it's called, yeah. Anyway, we are taking over all different types of podcasts because this is our spoiler special episode talking all about Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves. A small movie, a small indie movie you might have heard about. My name is Ben Byrne. I am here with Dael Kingsmill, Shawn Merwin, James Hake. And James, I know I asked you this question roughly an hour and a half ago, but I'm going to ask again. What is your initial impressions, just kind of surface level for the very second?
It was a very fun popcorn movie.
I'm using that exact phrase as well. Popcorn movie. It was fun. I think it is particularly great for families. I think kids will love it. I just think it's a good time.
I consumed no popcorn during the movie, and yet I still liked it. I thought it was a great generic fantasy movie and a great D&D movie as well.
I had one of those moments, because I haven't been to the cinemas in so long. I had one of those moments where the lights came up at the end and I was like, oh no, what happened? What happened? Because I ate everything. Yes, I think it's a great movie. We are as agreed upon as Rotten Tomatoes right now that this is a fantastic movie, but we're not here to mince words.
I do think that this is a great spot for kids. Tonally, I don't know whether I said this after I first saw it, but it to me sits in a similar place to like the new Jumanji movies, if that makes any sense. Like it's just kind of, here's a fun adventure, turn your brain off for a little bit. It's not that deep. I loved that there weren't really any big twists, because we were speculating for a while there. We were like, what's the twist going to be? Is the bad guy really a good guy? Is the good guy really? I love that they were just like, nah. It's exactly what you think it's going to be.
There's something I'll say about its kid appropriateness is that it harkens back, I think, to an era of the 80s where PG covered a pretty broad swath.
Oh, yeah.
I've been surprised recently in movies like, when was the time I first started thinking about this? I think it was Captain America Civil War. I first started thinking this is like, can they get away with cursing like this in a Marvel movie? And I say this about the D&D movie. Can they get away with cursing like this in a kids D&D movie? Because there were some S-bombs dropped in the film that I did not expect.
Well, I thought that about with the whole presentation of the Red Wizards, the way that the horn of badness, the MacGuffin horn kind of works. It's more than a MacGuffin,
Does anyone know what that artifact is called?
No.
Well, it is now a magic item on D&D Beyond.
Right.
This is something we forgot to mention in the Lorecast earlier, was they have released all the magic items from the movie as playable magic items on D&D Beyond now alongside the stat blocks.
I'm excited to see people use a portal gun. I mean, hither thither staff in actual D&D.
There is some legitimately scary imagery in this movie surrounding the Red Wizards that I thought was kind of metal in a way that you think of 90s kids movies that are great up to a certain point that will scar you for the rest of your life.
But in a good way. Every movie I've been scarred like that, I love.
Exactly. I think there's every single movie that's like, oh, this is great for kids. There's always that one scene that does scar you for life. Right? Going all the way back to the one Star Trek movie. It's like, oh, okay, this is cool for kids. And then the bug goes in the ear and it controlled the mind control thing. Right. And that scarred a generation of children for life. So, the part where the red mist is coming toward you and you're looking directly at it and then things come out, or the dead body sits up. Those were the two sort of jump scare moments, but nothing. It will scar you for life in just the right way.
Oh yeah. Yes. Last night I watched it so the first time I saw it, I went with my D&D group, surrounded by D&D people. We had the D&D conversation afterwards. Last night I went with my mother and my sister. So my mother has played maybe 2 one-shots. and doesn't know, any of the lore or the deep mechanics or anything like that. This is the sister, the Goose Cat sister, who really
oh right, yeah,
doesn't know, and broadly speaking doesn't care. She's happy D&D is a thing, but she's not chasing after it. So I saw it with them, and so I've got my two different perspectives, my in the know and my total newbie perspectives. My mum was sitting next to me last night and totally jumped when Zenk's parents, the monsters that were Zenk's parents, came out of that mist. That was so scary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Also, according to Frisha Vakadu in chat, the artifact is called the Horn of Beckoning Death, which in retrospect, I probably should have realized since the spell was called like the Beckoning Death. So
it is a cool horn. I think I might even put that in my campaign, although the rules for it are actually pretty brutal. If you go check it out on D&D Beyond, it's like, you hit 0, you're a zombie. Too bad, so sad.
Hyphen Hedgehog mentioned as well when Safina screamed and pointed at the camera during the druid chase scene. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that took me, because I read that and I was like, when did she do that? But then you reading that comment again was like, that's right. It was when she was the fly and she transformed into all the different things. All right, let's talk about that. There are definitely, actually, speaking of two types of people going in and seeing this movie, the litmus test is perhaps the people who recognize the axe beak and the people who said weird ostrich thing she turns into.
Yeah.
I've definitely seen those two comments on...
Can I be straddling with one foot in both of those realms? Because I was like, I know I should know what that's called.
To be fair,
I don't.
I feel like it was a fluke that I knew what that was called, to be fair. It's like the maybe except for the Winter Wolf, it's like the one like D&D specific monster that's in the beast section of the dungeon of the monster manual.
Hey man,
that's what stood out to me.
Blinkhounds and death dogs. Hey man.
All right, and them as well, but. All right, let's talk about the druid then, because that's where we're at in the conversation. Owlbear transforming was the least controversial thing she ended up doing as far as the rules go in that movie.
I love that scene. That was maybe my favorite scene in the movie. There's a lot to say about the way that that none of the spellcasting classes, save for Simon's sorcerer, wild magic sorcerer, cast any spells. But the druid not casting spells did not bother me at all.
I didn't even notice that the druid didn't cast any spells.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was holding my mouth because I have such a spiel about this. Okay, this is what I've been the most excited to talk about since I saw the movie the first time around, is the conception of what the classes look like as the filmmakers have decided to depict it.
Sure.
Versus what the 1D&D playtest material is shaping up these characters to look like, right? Because is this not exactly the thing, right? They've gone, all right, this character's a barbarian. What does that have to look like? What is the coolest thing about that? How do we sell that fantasy? She's got to pick up a brick and take out 6 armed guards. And it's the best. It's so good. Now I want to play a barbarian. The druid is going to have, a little infiltration spy mission that goes wrong. And now there's a chase and she turns from a fly into a mouse and she's gone through the whole thing. And that was so cool. It was so fun to watch. And I'm sold on wanting to be a druid. It doesn't matter that she doesn't cast spells. It almost doesn't even matter that the bard doesn't cast any spells, right? Edgin doesn't have any magic the whole way through the thing. He doesn't even actually really sing to distract the guards. When that happens, I thought, he's doing some barding. No, Simon's doing some magic. But the fact that the bard is about inspiring other people, he's about talking, he's about spying, he's about, stealth, all these things. I think it's so, so telling the way that these classes were presented on screen and how they're being sold to potential new players versus going in totally the opposite direction with 1D&D. Here's a druid that can't turn into something small until 11th level. You know what I mean? They're going in totally different directions, and there is a train wreck on the horizon if there isn't some kind of an alignment.
I don't think the designers of 5e or D&D in general have seen this movie virtually until it came out, because I think it was Chris Perkins was talking about the magic items in a little D&D Beyond interview that they did when those magic items went up on D&D Beyond a few days ago. And he was saying Yeah, the first time I saw what they did was when I saw the movie, like, probably in a pre-screening a few weeks ago or something like that. And that's how they designed those magic items off what they did in the movie. They didn't have the script or the rules for those magic items like written out first necessarily.
So reminiscent of like when there have been times I've done videos that are like sponsored videos that come out ahead of a film or something like that. And so you get this little packet of information. They're like, this is what we want you to talk about. So here's the tiny window of stuff that you get to see so that your video can sort of make sense. But you're really operating with blinders on you because you don't get the full context of the thing.
I think it's then perhaps very fortunate that the one D&D Druid playtest was so ill-received because a lot of that stuff that is, incongruent with the movie is probably not going to survive.
Yeah, so many times we've watched movies or even other media and said, boy, I would love to play that as the game. I remember sitting in a theater several years ago and watching the Acquisitions Incorporated game that was streamed out to theaters. And at the end, I looked at the guy sitting next to me who I was designing games with and said, we should make that game. And it's so fun to do that. And this probably is something that's not normal for Wizards of the Coast employees, to be the one who has to wait and see something and then make something based on that. So, I hope they had fun doing that.
Bringing it back to the Druid, I hope that the Druid is able to channel spell slots into wild shapes, the way that the Paladin is able to channel spell slots into smites, because that removes any mechanical barrier to Doric, the Druid, working the way she does.
I think that would be super cool to see.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it would be fun to transform from one wild shape into the next? Just go fluid. Now I'm a mouse. Now I'm a bird. Now I'm a deer. Now I'm an axebeak. Now I'm a whatever else.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Totally.
It's a great sequence. It's such a great sequence.
I'm going to have to rain on this parade. I'm going to rain on this parade. What we saw on the screen was amazing and it was fun, but it's not a game.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we have to bring this reality. At least it's not a game that we have in front of us right now. Could it be a game? Yes. But as we're watching that scene play out, what are all the other characters doing? What are all the other players doing?
To be fair, when one character in the party is infiltrating and spying on a thing during the game, what are all the other characters doing?
That is a very good point. What do you run scenes like that in your game? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. How does a game deal with that? And you have to step back and you have to say, what is at the heart of role-playing games that make them fun for the people who are playing at that time? And can we make a game that does mimic or that does represent these things, these other media that we love? And it's great to say, let the Druid use those to wild shape as much as you want. But what does that turn into when you actually play the game at the table?
Well, this is why I've been so excited to talk about it with other people who like design and write for D&D as well. Like, this is the layers, right? Players, newbies, people who get really down in the muck when it comes to the mechanics and how they work and balance and stuff. Because isn't it so interesting? Because I bring this up ultimately because I think that at the heart of rule design is you are selling a concept, and how do you boil that concept down to its basest? Here's the cool thing that you want to do. Let's make rules that achieve that, right? And I think that can look a million different ways, and I think it can be crunchy or it can be loose and all those sorts of things. It is really interesting that I came home from the movie last night with Goosecat sister, and she was asking questions about D&D, and at some point during the conversation, she sort of said, so what is the difference between a sorcerer and a wizard? And I'm trying to boil it down to its basic thing. So I sort of say, well, a lot of it comes down to the fact that a wizard has to prepare their spells, whereas a sorcerer can sort of spontaneously cast their spells. And then she asked more questions and more questions. And I had to explain Vancian magic to her. And she was so distraught. I can't describe. She's sitting there. No, this game is supposed to be fun. Why? She was so upset. She was like in that heartbeat, she went from, yeah, this would be fun to play to, I don't want to ever have to do this. And I think it really speaks to this tricky balancing act that I think we're going to watch the designers have to walk soon, of how do you balance the traditions of D&D with the perception of what it should be. And I think you see that as well in, like, I've pulled up a meme that I saw on Reddit last night that was DMing the new crop of post D&D movie players. And it's things like, why is this fight taking so long? But Holger was able to fight, 6 guys solo. Simon never had to run out of spell slots or whatever, things like that. But ultimately I look at those things and I'm like, all right, but why can't Holger, the barbarian, take out 6 dudes? Why can't the druid do these things? And Shawn is right. Balance is important. But I mean, I sat there thinking about if you had 4E style, like, here's your coolest thing that you can do. For the next hour, you can change into beasts as many times as you like. Or James's description totally works. That idea, if you have spell slots, you can use them for spells or you can use them for wild shapes, but you're going to have to burn through them. I think there is room for both. I think there's room for, this is what we have sold the fantasy as, and also there are rules that make that happen. But I think to achieve that, it would require, rather than sort of renovating some of the rules, demolishing some of them and building from the ground up. For example, Vancian magic, which is and always has been bad.
Yeah, I don't like it. Just very quickly, I mean, my response to players who ask about Simon's spell slots or Doric's wild shaping multiple times is simply that, like, who says that Simon doesn't run out of spell slots? We don't really see him cast that many spells.
Yeah, that was
and
the
maybe
weakest
it's because, or who says that after she does all those wild shapes, Doric, I can't remember what happens immediately after, so maybe she's like fine and just walks it off. But I'm pretty sure she kind of walks away from that being like, thank God I got away, and kind of tired from having gone through all those transformations, which for me is ultimately what spell slots as a non-fan of Vancian magic kind of represent, is the energy, the wherewithal, the endurance that your character has to be able to cast multiple and high-powered spells across, a day or several days of adventuring.
What you're talking about is resource management, right? D&D is a resource management game with a storytelling problem, or a storytelling game with a resource management problem. And we see that whenever we see these adaptations of the game to tell cool stories with. There was no mention of, oh, I'm out of spells. Oh, I can't rage again. Oh, I can't do this. Oh, I can't do that. Because stories don't want that to happen. But games, or at least certain types of games, mandate that to happen. And it goes to story pacing, and it goes to all of these things that are supposed to translate from storytelling to game design, but generally fail to, unless the DM is very careful in changing or keeping track of both the resources and the story as it goes on.
Back to the movie. It's a lot of fun and also very funny to see where this conversation has gone, talking about this movie with game designers.
Yeah.
Let's jump back to some of the characters. I just wanted to quickly throw out there Zank, who I was very famously kind of rolling my eyes at the trailer for, in terms of like, is he a bad guy? Is he going to be boring? Favorite party character. Felt so safe when Zank was around.
Yeah. He's such a DMPC, and I love him.
Zank.
I love everything about him.
He's the best.
Also,
I loved his introduction when he pulls the Muppet out of the fish. Like, I know they were going for practical effects.
Tabaxi, baby.
But there was something there that felt like, it felt like parody, but done so sincerely. I loved it.
Like a Victoria's Secret model, like he's floating on air, and then he stops to talk to that dragonborn, and he goes, "Gently to you as well, my friend."
But I bought it though. Like, I totally bought into his character. It didn't feel like the actor was doing a parody.
Yeah.
Like the puppet was funny. That felt kind of slightly parody-ish, but like in a way that was really funny in terms of how seriously he took this Tabaxi baby. But then his character just felt so real and so like when Chris Pine's like, "You're not much fun, are you?" I was like, "No, he's not." But also, I love him.
He's the worst best. Also, what incredible ASD representation. That man is on the spectrum. And
also, it culminates, of course, in the best joke in the movie, where he's walking away from the party and the camera just keeps on zooming back till it's just the party being like, "What's it gonna do? There's a rock in the way." Just without breaking stride.
Just gonna go over the rock.
Completely over the rock. It's the best joke in the movie. It's so good.
I forgot about that.
What a champion! Also, his fight with the assassins.
Drayless, played by Jason Wong. That was fantastic. Which I didn't spot this.
His little
green flame blade.
Yeah,
That's
green flame.
Yeah.
Oh, just.
I maybe we're jumping around a little bit, but just when James brought up the joke, it just reminded me my favorite scene in the movie. I was literally crying with laughter. Was the Speak with Dead scene, which surprised me how much I love that because I saw the intro to it in the trailer or in the clip that they released, and I was like, okay, that's funny. But then when they get to the other zombie and they're like, what's 2 + 3? I'm not good at math. And just dies. That killed me. That killed me.
The fact that I fully thought that they'd, shown us the funniest bit of the clip. And then to go in and see that it kept going and they were like, well, no, it doesn't make sense for every single person at this battle to have seen the helmet. It doesn't make sense for them all to have died doing something. Just really well done.
Yeah.
And the continual flashbacks that we keep seeing. And then at the end of the movie, we're about to see the big flashback. It's just like, nope. Okay, we're done. No more flashbacks. That was just like, it was such great directing, great storytelling.
If I'm remembering this correctly, didn't some of it was like the flashback first and then you saw how they died and then it cuts back to the zombie and you're like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yeah. That's what he looks like now.
Yeah. I fell getting out of the bath or the guy who didn't even get to the battle.
That's right.
That was
my theater audibly cringed at that death. They were like, oh.
I mean, this is a look for all that I kind of derided this being a quip fest, and it was, make no mistake, I did feel like to sort of rein it in slightly, I felt like both Doric, who not only did she not cast any spells, but she barely had any lines after the first intro in the movie. Not only did Doric, I feel like, have the Drax kind of thing of like, I take everything literally, thus joke. So did Zenk, and I think Zenk pulled it off so much literally. More.
I think she just didn't buy into the, I don't know, I guess that's the word that they use in the movie, but the arbitrary sort of rules bound on everything, She was
right. Sure,
I don't know that she was literal so much, but she did have that thing of like, okay, but what's the point of you being here? She was pragmatic in the same way that Zenk was, but she wasn't quite to the point of son of a bitch, meaning that you blame his mother.
Well, she's that one party member whose character does not fit the rest of the group.
She's the straight man.
Sure.
Yeah.
Everybody rocked up with a joke character and Zenk and Doric rocked up with like, oh wait, I thought we were playing like a different style of campaign.
Yeah.
Actually, also speaking of the straight man, ironically, I will point out it did feel a little bit strange, the sort of romance wrap up between Simon and Doric at the end. It wasn't like it came out of nowhere, but particularly when Doric's introduction to the film had so much romantic tension with that random like protester NPC for them to just be like, okay, ignore that, forget all of that energy because she's going to get with Simon at the end, was just a little bit odd for me. So ironic that she was the group straight man.
Does anybody else have a favorite character or a favorite scene that hasn't been mentioned yet?
Oh, Thumbershot has to be one of the highlights of the movie, right? Because I had a D&D group and then other non-D&D people in our group watching, and they're like, "Is that dragon normal? Is that what that dragon is?" I was like, "No, that is a chunky dragon." And they're like, "Yeah, it's really chunky." I'm like, yes, it is. And we were all like terrified and laughing at the same time as they're running away from this dragon. It was just so emblematic of a D&D game, right? Where this thing that's almost a joke will likely kill you, a la a mimic, a la some other weird, strange monsters.
Whoever's idea that was, they were like, we have to have a dragon. What if we make it an extreme chunky boy? Genius.
I think one review I saw of the movie was like, I saw a dungeon, I saw a dragon, 10 out of 10. Love it. Like, fully satisfied with this movie.
I also, this is where I say, I have some notes for the Hasbro toy department. All right.
Okay.
We gotta talk. We gotta get out there. What are those things that are basically pillows, but also toys? They're called like plushmallows. Squishmallows. We need a Thembachord Squishmallow. I think that you can also get in there an owlbear Squishmallow. We need to be getting into the plush game because this movie has opened up avenues.
Yeah, I would love a Thembachord, like, you know, those like huge Snorlax pillows that were like sold through GameStop or whatever. When I was working at EB, those things were a nightmare because they would take up the entire storeroom if you had two of them in there. But I would totally get a Thembachord one of those, or like a beanbag or something for my dog, because that would be adorable and hilarious.
So the scene that I loved, sorry, I have to get to this.
Please jump in.
We've all been DMs and we've been like, all right, you need to impress these people. What do you do, wizard? And you're like going through their spell list. I'm like, well, I can't do fireball. I can't do flame strike. I can't do this. How about blur?
Prestidigitation.
Yeah, blur. When Simon is up there, he's like, I'm blurry. Look, I'm blurry. I was like, that is, I swear that my group has done that before. Like, okay, I need to do something cool. Look, I'm all blurry. Isn't that great?
Also, the neat little reference at that scene to fresh cut grass. I'm glad they got one in there.
Yeah, my wife asked me, she was like, was that a reference to Critical Role? I was like, I don't know, because it definitely seems like one, but I'm not entirely sure. I didn't know whether the description of the spell said, like, you create smells like fresh cut grass, is what I thought, but I never went back and checked.
That to me makes me think that it is a deliberate reference is that I don't know why it would be worded exactly like that rather than freshly cut grass or a mown lawn, or there's a lot of ways of framing that. And maybe it was an accident, but if it was a very happy one.
Speaking of things that I've definitely done as a dungeon master along the lines of what Shawn was saying, when Hugh Grant is, that's right, Dael, I said Grant, when he's drinking tea and there's the joke about the tea's too hot. For me personally, that joke is way funnier than it has any right to be because he just keeps bringing it up. But the thing that killed me about that is when he turns to Safina and he's like, can you cool this down? And if I'm GMing that scene, I'm like, yes, I want to show how powerful she is and how effortlessly powerful she is. She freezes her finger. You see the icicles form upon it and she dips it in the tea and the tea instantly cools. And then seeing that on screen, I'm like, yeah, that is ridiculous. Like, that is the sort of thing a DM might describe and make up in the moment that they think sounds incredibly cool.
Yeah. Well, if we're talking about things made up in the moment, I have to say Jarnathan is the best one because that's absolutely the NPC the player makes up on the spot to insert into the backstory. It's like, yeah, of course, he's the last missing barrister. Jarnathan.
Take a name that exists, shift one letter. Also, the way she yells, Jonathan.
Yeah. One of my friends was quoting that all the way back to the car park. She was just screaming Jonathan every 10 feet.
Jonathan.
That scene was so great. I have to say as well. So for me, I didn't love the immediate opening scene. I thought it was a cool. I see conceptually that they're setting it up. It's very dark, gritty. It's a bit Game of Thrones, and then they chuck in characters who are absolutely not Game of Thrones. Right? That's amusing. I didn't love it because it seemed very well, this female character is super strong, so we're going to threaten her with sexual violence so that she can show off how strong she is. And I just, it had no place in the movie for me. You could easily start with them out on the ice and have someone try to pick a fight with them, like in the prison yard equivalent. You know, you can have that scene without doing that. I was a little unimpressed with that. But they super won me over with, you know, here's the part in hearing. He's going to tell you his character backstory. And you get, you know, the idea of what his class background is. You get all this stuff. And then the thing that super won me over was that I was so in my head about the law that I knew that when they were saying there's an Aarakocra on the council, we can absolutely get free. I was thinking, yes, because Aarakocra love freedom. Yes, of course. It totally took me by surprise and was such a player move for them to grab him and leap out the window.
Yeah,
that was perfection. That's when it totally switched to the correct tone for the movie for me.
Sure.
But we approved your pardon.
Yeah.
What do you do at that point? Do you go, I guess you go back into jail for assaulting a counselor?
Yeah. Well, that's why
when they just left him in the snow.
Well, yeah, me
Jonathan.
too. Like that guy's got 18 seconds left of life. Help him. No, but it sets up another moment in the third act where that barrister calls the cops on him when she recognizes them.
Right.
Totally.
Yeah.
And can I say, because I didn't realize it until halfway through the movie last night, literally that scene where she calls the cops on them. So this is 2.5 viewings of the movie through. Did I realize that she was a halfling? I didn't realize that she was small until it took me that long. And what a strange scale they chose. It was very Ella Enchanted rather than, Lord of the Rings in terms of they're this big.
Holger's reunion with her husband, who I can't think of the actor's name for the life of me.
Bradley Cooper.
Who plays Bradley Cooper, thank you. Which was weird and hilarious to see a tiny Bradley Cooper just like walk in and out of this movie. It was like, what on earth? But I agree. Like it's not quite Lord of the Rings ingenuity where you completely buy the scale of Frodo sitting next to Gandalf. There was something that was kind of uncanny valley about the size of the halflings compared to everybody else.
Yeah. That
Well,
scene as well. Sorry.
I also read that who is the Michelle Rodriguez, when she filmed that scene, it wasn't Bradley Cooper. It was a different actor. And they brought Bradley Cooper in later to reshoot his part of that conversation.
Ripped to that unknown actor.
I know.
So they were never together in the same room.
Right.
Oh my God.
Oh,
Movie
geez.
magic.
Movie magic. That scene as well was an interesting one because no one in my player group even mentioned it. But for me, as someone who plays D&D, that seemed so D&D, right? The idea, you're on your way to this place, and on the way you have to go through the town where your ex-husband from your backstory lives. You have to have this conversation with your NPC because I am looping your character into the narrative, even though the scene is not connected to anything and will barely connect to anything later on. You got a magic item. But that is so D&D. But again, Goosecat Sister came in, was just like that. Why did that happen? Well, because D&D.
And comedy.
Comedy. I mean, I was wondering as well, after the first time I saw it, I was wondering about the structure of the movie overall, right? Because it is such a D&D structure to be like, this is your ultimate goal. In order to achieve that, you have to do this, and then this, and then this, and then that plan doesn't work, so you need to shift play. You know what I mean? That structure is so familiar to me, but is very unusual for a film.
Most of the negative reviews I read said that. It just, there was no thread through the movie. They just went from this one monster to this one magic item to this, and there was no rhyme or reason to it. And I was thinking, have you ever played D&D?
Yeah.
Exactly.
This
is the perfect D&D movie.
I read a really interesting review from the ABC that I fully disagreed with.
The Australian broadcasting.
The Australian broadcasting, So it's our equivalent of like PBS, I guess. Maybe not quite, but similar.
Well, I thought the America had ABC as well, but
they do.
They do have an ABC
channel,
right? But their
not the
ABC is very commercial, so it's not really the equivalent. Ours is the channel that has no ads, basically. But this review was such a bizarre one for me because she didn't like the movie, but she seemed to be appealing to the authority of the source material to back up why she didn't like it. But she clearly wasn't familiar enough with D&D to recognize the D&D elements that were in the story. So it was like,
right,
it's not enough like D&D, and also the plot meanders because they have to go and fetch magic items. And it's like, okay, well, this is an issue for me. I also do think that actually the heist genre was probably a good pick for it, because if we're talking about plots that do that in standard media, heists are pretty similar. We have to get into the vault, but we have to get this, and this before we can do it.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I liked how they kind of showed off different styles of adventure. They go to the Underdark, and it's like a dungeon crawl. They go to Neverwinter initially, and there's some, it's not, I don't know, I'd call it political intrigue so much, but there are social interactions that they have. Then they do the heist, which my favorite part of the heist was honestly getting into the carriage. I thought that part was not only funny, but also just really well shot and really engaging and really fast paced. And it was like exactly how a group of players would come up with a very clever plan to get inside of a carriage to plant this thing.
That one is up there as like one of my favorite scenes in the movie because it is absolutely player character logic. It's totally PC logic. Like, yeah, the cart has windows in it. Just shoot the portal through the window. No. We have this plan. We're going to put the portal underneath the portrait of Volo, and we're going to sneak the portrait onto the bottom of the carriage.
Good Easter egg pick there. I didn't spot that was Volo.
I'm pretty sure it's Volo. It's not 100%, but I'm pretty sure that's Volo.
Even if it isn't, it is now.
Oh, yeah. What that reminded me of was a skill challenge, right? It's a skill challenge where you have to fail forward. Right. So you need to have 4 successes before 3 failures. And if it fails, then we need to come up with a way where it still could work. And it was just so nicely done.
Also, I love that, there's that last step. It's all gone great. Well done, us. And then the final thing of, but the pitcher's fallen face down.
Yeah, somebody's mentioned that in the chat.
Great little spanner to throw in the works. And the fact that immediately the party brainstormed 4 new plans. And they split the party. Like, I'm going to stay here and turn into a worm. I'm going to go, I loved that moment where they're just like, we got to split up and do 2 different plans at the same time. Was super D&D to me as well. Visually speaking, I was surprised because, again, I came in there thinking, is this just going to be Forgotten Realms, the movie? Like, what's going to make it D&D instead? I wish they'd done more of this because early on, I think it's when they do the, I would consult my notes because I took notes into the cinema yesterday. But as it turns out, the light of the screen is not enough to write
Not great for taking notes. No, I learned that taking notes in theater, in like live action theater when I was a kid in school.
It didn't go great. But no, the thing that really stood out to me first viewing was when they go in the flashback into the vault, the Harper's vault, to seal the thing. And you get this sort of bird's eye view of the chamber. And it was super like a battle map. And I was like, oh, that's such a cool way of doing this. Just these little references to D&D throughout. And I would have loved more of that because I think they only do it twice. I think they do it then and then with the bridge in the Underdark that collapses.
My dad, because they showed the clip about the bridge rules on Colbert when Roger was on Colbert. And my dad looked to me when we watched that interview together and he said, is that a parody on complicated D&D rules? And I'm thinking to myself, I don't think it is, but it's cool to see the people only passingly familiar with D&D do see it that way. Because absolutely. That's absolutely a punchline to that joke. It's just for people who really know D&D rules. Maybe it's not.
Well, I thought it was a reference to how complex. Like, I was thinking of Tomb of Annihilation. There's some puzzles in Tomb of Annihilation that are kind of like that are like, they must step on the snake tiles, but if they step on a elephant one, some stuff's going to happen. So you need to. And there's like one puzzle in Tomb of Annihilation where they've got to cross a bridge by like running their fingers along like a line, a groove in the stone, but it runs along with other grooves. And so they've got to get to the other end without sort of getting into the wrong groove. It's basically like a maze puzzle with your finger that activates a stone golem if you fail. So
you said the magic word there, I think, puzzle. I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
I think it was a satire of puzzles in general about how a lot of players are like, okay, we can do this. And then one player's just like, I don't even care. I'm just going to step on this stone and see what happens.
The DM just screws up like the piece of paper that he stained with coffee that like symbolized the bridge and throws it over his shoulder.
Did anyone see that clip of Chris Pine on Kimmel? Where he asks the crowd, he's like, "Does anyone here play D&D?"
Oh, yeah.
And absolute silence.
Yeah.
Poor guy. The peeps who got Colbert really lucked out there. I think that answers Joey's question from the last hour about how popular D&D is now.
Yeah.
It's doing
absolutely.
fine, but
I have nothing to fear about D&D becoming too mainstream. We're safe. Wait, sorry. Before we move on, Dael, you were talking about like battle map references. I love that the whole third act fight was a big 5-foot grid. That was choice.
I just really liked that direct bird's eye view thing to emphasize. Just every now and then, just a little establishing shot. I think would have really emphasized it in a nice way that also was aesthetically pleasing.
That was we're talking about the maze scene with the changing maze. I thought that was really fantastic. I said this on the Lorecast, I think, which is what we're recording now, I suppose, a few weeks ago, about how I wish, and I understand why they didn't, they probably couldn't ultimately, but I wish so much they hadn't shown the mimic in the trailer, because I think if that had been a surprise, the audience would have absolutely lost their minds. It would have been so fantastic. But I also had to think to myself, and I don't know if anybody's going to agree with me on this, but I was like, that's not how Displacer Beasts work. That doesn't seem right whatsoever.
I love me a Displacer Beast. I don't know if I'm on board for this. Their tentacles are projectors.
It also like clearly demonstrates which one's the fake one and which one's the real one. So if you're looking directly at them, there shouldn't be any disadvantage to the attack roll.
A concession made for the audience, perhaps.
Yeah, for sure. Also, with the gelatinous cube, when they jump in and they get pulled out, I was like, they should be down to their like muscle layer or whatever the next layer underneath the skin is. This needs to be way more violent.
I actually really enjoyed that because all they took was HP damage.
Yeah,
they just lost a couple HP. They all walk out, no even
they
like
certainly
burn
weren't
marks or
bloodied
anything.
yet.
Yeah, it's
not only
like,
that,
wow,
it
that hurt.
Removed the magic dampening bracelet, so you had to have that in there.
Goose Cat's sister really called me on my bullshit last night. Sorry, Dante. Sorry for the the PG rating. But it was, we got out of the thing, and at some point she said, "Man, I'm really pleased that those bracelets came back, because I was thinking they should get one of those anti-magic bracelets and put it on the evil wizard." And I said, "That's great, and I love that thinking." She's like, "I would have won at D&D," and I was like, "I will point out that if in your D&D game that happened, it's because your DM put a wall of anti-magic bracelets there, hoping you would think of this." She was like, because the DM's just the best ever. It's like, okay.
Actually, the DM is the best ever.
Was it just me? Hyphen Hedgehog has asked if Vala's Call, I'm not familiar with what that is, was the third team in the arena. I'd forgotten that there was a third team.
Well, the 80s show was
is that the 80s show characters? They were definitely there. I don't know.
The cartoon. Are you talking about the cartoon, or was there a separate 80s show?
I was talking about the cartoon. Yeah,
Hyphen Hedgehog is saying that besides the cartoon characters and the protagonists,
I only read the first sentence. This one's on me.
Was there? Yeah, because I actually didn't remember that there was a third team there. I appreciated that the cartoon characters were there. At the same time, as soon as I looked at them, I was like, they look like they're in cosplay. Like these characters look like they're in clothes that would be worn in the context of this world. These characters look very explicitly like they're in like cosplaying for this event, I suppose.
Did they mention the gray hands?
They did.
I
only saw the movie once, and I was like, I think they just said gray hands.
The gray hands, of course, being some Realms lore. The feeder group to Force Grey.
A cool little blink and you miss it stuff like that was great.
Yeah.
I think the second viewing, I think that the guy that Edgin trips on the bridge in his Harper flashback was a Gith Yankee.
Yes, I thought that too when I saw it.
for this throwaway thing. It was great.
I love the little Yuanti in the prison, like the second shot of the movie or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of Easter eggs, I loved the rust monsters that are like fighting over a piece of metal up on the
that was my
sign.
favorite. That was my favorite little Easter egg in the movie, the rust monsters.
What I
like this small.
Yeah. What I like that this movie did, speaking of lore, was not try to overdo the fantasy elements. All of the main characters were either human or half elf, not a lot of prosthetics or CGI needed. They saved that for like the tabaxi coming out of the fish or these just 2-second appearances and then go away. And they probably saved themselves like $50 million by doing that.
Oh, that's a good
I
call.
actually really like that Sophia Lillis as Doric was not in full tiefling red skin, golden eyes makeup.
I agree,
I don't
but
mind.
I'm kind of like
visually, I liked it.
Did she need to be a tiefling? Like, was there anything tiefling-esque about her?
Well, I will say because
could she be a wood elf and it wouldn't have changed
her
anything?
backstory was I was born to humans and then they didn't want a tiefling daughter, blah, blah, blah. And I think that would have landed more if she did have red skin or something, just to emphasize that there is something that is not human about her because she looked fairly human.
If she did anything with her tail, I think it might have been sold a bit better. I didn't even know she had a tail. Yeah, Hellish Rebuke.
Yeah, if she'd Hellish Rebuke.
That would have been
Well, she didn't
great.
cast any spells.
Yeah.
I guess they didn't want to confuse people with the magic users. They wanted Simon to be the central magic user. They had his whole storyline where it's like, we have to build up him getting to be able to do this. So if there were other magic users, the audience would just ask, why don't they do it?
There's my dark fantasy wish list. If I was to like re-edit this movie, the two small changes is I would have when they get pulled out of the gelatinous cube, just blood and like, stuff just like also pull out of the cube as they get pulled out and they're raw. And
I'm like, this is a great movie for kids. And you're like, let me change that.
And I would also love a Hellish Rebuke, but her whole appearance just changes. Like she goes from like looking fairly human to completely devilish for just a few seconds. Like her eye color changes, her skin like almost Mystique style folds into scales, and she's like terrifying for a moment, and then just goes back to herself at the end of it.
On that.
Sorry, I was just going to shout out real quick that John Francis Daly has also been tweeting a bunch of behind the scenes stuff of the practical effects and how it works. And the company that did it, Legacy Effects. So if you want to see some cool little behind the scenes clips there, it's pretty dope stuff. You've got Jonathan and his wings. You've got Dragonborns mapped to someone's face live. It's very cool stuff.
On the note of facial changes, I want to say, though, I was more or less unimpressed with Safina as a villain. I think she's growing on me the more I watch it. She just, she didn't say a lot. So I was like, what's going on here? But I think on a second viewing, I'll like her a lot more. But just about that, I love the way that from start to end of the movie, you see her go through 3 distinct sort of appearances, from the black cloak to the full red robe Thayan look to the like lich look in the final battle. That was a really cool villain progression.
Yeah.
What did we think of that final battle? I thought that was very fun, kind of calling out like, is it like earthen grasp gets used at one point, probably against like Bigby's hand or
really showing off concentration and stuff like that.
Yeah. But also like the way that there's that one kind of almost rotating shot where they're each like taking a turn to attack her, and then she either deflects it or she takes some form of damage or something, and then the next person kind of comes in.
Really
they did a
like
good job of making that feel fluid.
Yeah, and it felt like they actually, for that combat, they didn't just choreograph a cool fight. They were like, let's choreograph a cool fight that fits within the rules of D&D, which I appreciated.
And that's why you don't put a solo monster in for a battle. You have other...
Unless you got time stop that doesn't get counterspelled and you're like, oh, damn it.
Yeah, Crow Hollow has brought up the Owlbear Hulk smash, which I think is so telling, right?
It is exactly what I thought.
Hulk smash.
100%.
And you know what? It was funny at Avengers and it's funny now. And I laughed unreasonably hard when she finishes bashing her up and then she reaches the little grasping and then smashes her again. I laughed so hard.
I reckon that's the like directors or whoever was sitting there going like, we want to use this. We know they did it in Avengers. how do we make that funny again? And it's the second smash, like doing it once and then doing it again is how to make that funny a second time.
You know, I think it's really good that we bring up Avengers because that's the movie that I thought of the most while watching this.
Yeah.
Like this is the same feeling I got from watching early MCU, like the Avengers, before the MCU became just a sort of slog of endless drudgery. And it was so delightful.
I agree. It did feel like an Avengers movie where we were kind of missing the prequel movies that would introduce everybody's character. I wonder if those might be coming at some point.
There's definitely 2 books. There's 2 novels.
I have them, actually. I got given them by a friend of mine. I haven't read them yet, but I have the both of them. Because they're, one review that was critical did say something to the effect, or maybe I read this on Twitter, something to the effect of it was a movie, or maybe this was in our chat on the previous episode of the Lorecast. I can't remember, the one we recorded this morning. But anyway, the point being, somebody said it was a very plot-driven movie rather than a character-driven movie. And while there was character in it, as I sort of joked about earlier, Doric kind of doesn't have a lot to do in terms of character development after she's introduced, you know? Even Simon kind of falls into the background a little bit. Zenk comes in and disappears, and you kind of get his whole kind of backstory very quickly. When Holger was dying at the end, I hadn't quite put it together. I'm sure others saw this coming, but I hadn't quite put it together that they were going to use the tablet to resurrect her. And so when she's dying, I was like, I don't feel like they've earned this. I don't feel like the tone of the movie has been so upbeat so far. I'm not going to shed a tear for Holger, unfortunately.
I fully saw it coming, which might be fortunate for me because I remember when I first saw the film, at that point, I was in one of those cinemas with the recliner chairs. But I also had one of those movie-sized drinks. So I was getting that point, and it happened again last night. That's the point of the movie where I start to need to pee. So I'm like trying to adjust myself so that I can, rearrange my bladder, maybe buy myself a little more time. And so I went to change the angle of the recliner. And it just in the middle of this like heart-wrenching, oh no, it's so sad. Here's the flashback of her life as basically being Kira's mother. I tried to adjust the thing and my friend and I just burst out laughing. It was not very good. Anyway.
Hey, that's a perfect D&D moment right there. Right during. But isn't that, I don't know how your games have been in your lives, but my games have always been plot driven, and we may get into a little character development, but it's like, oh, my parents are died. I'm an orphan, and I have something against the law. And that's as far as we go. And every once in a while, I'll see a sheriff and I will growl at them. And that's my character development moment for this campaign. Yeah. That's how most games have always been in my world. So I totally expected this sort of, I was surprised when they even had, Ed Gein understand that he's been being selfish while he thinks he's been being brave for his daughter. Right? He's doing this for himself, but he says it's for his daughter. And he realizes that at the end, that's like 20,000 times more complex than any story that any of the players I've ever DM'd for have wanted their character to have. So I was totally cool with that sort of plot driven thing for this movie. For this first movie that is meant to introduce people to D&D and the sort of fun that you can have with, and the jokes that can come with it, and the adventures that you can have. Let's see where we go from there.
That's interesting. The one bit that like definitely wasn't D&D for me, the one bit that made me go, nah, fake D&D. This isn't real D&D. Was when the party have all the gold. They've got the boat. They've got the daughter, they've got the tap, they've got everything they need, and they're sailing away, and they look back and see that the city's about to like come under some terrible danger, and well, they're like, we got to turn the boat around, we got to go back and do the right thing. I'm like, no way would my players do that. They'd be like, too bad, so sad.
You know what happened there, Ben?
Come back.
The DM said, well, you can turn around right now, or the adventure's over, the campaign's done. And so
that's fair.
The players turned around.
That's fair. I thought they had seen Guardians of the Galaxy and were like, this is what happens in Guardians of the Galaxy. But I like that explanation better.
Yeah.
We're in a funny little juggling act, right? Because there are flaws cinematically that we can excuse because it's D&D, right? Like, who needs this character development to really make sense? It's just a one-line explanation of her backstory. That's how it works in D&D, right? But at the same time, there are elements that we're criticizing that make a good movie that is cinematically appropriate that we're like, but that's not very D&D. So it's a bizarre, I don't know, almost experiment in terms of media mixing. But I love to see it.
Zaz Tam, that was someone I wanted to quickly touch on. Ian Hanmore, I believe, is the actor who portrayed Zaz Tam, which I thought was interesting because I didn't know whether Zaz Tam had an actor or whether they were just a CGI puppet. But apparently they had an actor. Do we think that they are the Thanos of the new D&D cinematic universe? Are they being set up as the big bad for phase 1 of the D&D cinematic universe?
Don't say that.
Yeah, don't say that.
Oh, you know it's coming.
I don't know what's coming.
You've hijacked your own question with that statement, Ben.
Yeah.
Fair.
You know what? Actually, this came up earlier, and I will say, in the comparison with the Marvel films, someone said in the chat, I think, during the last recording an hour ago, they mentioned that the references to D&D felt additive. Like, you didn't need to get the reference to get the movie. It felt like just a bonus for people who do, which I think is part of why we compare it to early Marvel, right? Because early Marvel was like that. It was like, if you have seen all of the movies that led up to Avengers, you're going to get a couple of extra references, and it's just like a little reward, a little treat for you because you went the extra mile. Versus, well, if you missed, I don't know, The Matrix 2 is an example. There was a bunch of stuff between The Matrix 1 and The Matrix 2 that if you hadn't seen all this extra media, you don't get that part of The Matrix. This scene just straight up doesn't make sense. And it was a real shift in how things sort of worked in terms of crossing over different media platforms. But then as time has gone on, the Marvel movies have become a lot more, well, if you didn't watch WandaVision, you're in trouble, which I think is a real shame. So I don't know. Hopefully we'll keep in that side of things.
It's what comics have been grappling with for years, and I can't wait till the Marvel Cinematic Universe does its version of the New 52, the Flashpoint, like whatever they do to just like hard
Superboy Prime
reset.
punches the universe.
Yeah, everything. Sorry, James, what were you going to say?
Oh, I just want to take it back to Zaz Tam and say that scene where Safina is talking with Zaz Tam is beautifully shot. The way that they had the ultimate lich just kind of lurking in a dark corner, whispering to her, was such a good villain introduction. Even though Zaz Tam is just kind of evil man, to get an introduction like that for an evil man it's tonally perfect. It's fantastic. We're far enough away from Harry Potter 8 that he doesn't just look like Voldemort.
But when they did the flashback to when he took over Thay, you expected him to look like all of the other Thayan Zulkirs, I think they're called. But no, he looked like a lich then. And it's like, wait, was he always this way? Did this not? So it's hard
Born like this.
With Thanos, you can, he's obviously despicable, but he's got this misguided sort of humanity's, I don't know what to call it, this twisted logic that humans have. But Zaz Tam is just so far removed from any sort of human connection that it's hard to make him a good villain unless he, as James said, is just the bad guy and that's it.
Well, I think you're right, but I think the thing to remember is we had no idea what Thanos's motivations were until Infinity War. We had no idea about this twisted ecological, bond, if you will, or ideal, I suppose, that Thanos carried, because that was a problem that the Russo brothers and the writers of Infinity War and Endgame had to tackle. Was like, all right, well, now the big villain's coming in. How do we present his character in a satisfying way? So I'm fully ready for a Zaz Tam kind of movie, maybe in 3 or 4 movies' time, that introduces him as someone who believes undeath is a gift that he's giving to everybody or something like that, So I'm willing to kind of be led, but I love that scene that you were describing, James, as well, because it's also really scary in the right way. Like if I was a little kid watching that scene, I would be like so tense the whole time, but like it would form a very positive memory for me, I think.
It's only possible because it's happening between sessions. It's a write up the DM sent to everyone. There's no party players there. He can do what he wants. I just thought of this, that sort of flashback to the original rite of doom and bad things, whatever the thing was called, the evil spell. That scene, the beckoning death. Thank you. That scene, the second time around, I realized that they describe it as he had gathered all of the citizens for a celebration, and then they show you what amounts to like an assembly. Everyone stand here quietly and face the front while we do some ceremony.
Well, the other thing is, if he defeated all the other undead leaders of Thay, aren't they already undead? Like, what happens to them if they go in the mist? Does it turn them mindless?
No, they're not undead.
Yeah, so Zastian is a Zolkir of necromancy. The 8 Zolkirs are based around the circles of magic. That's why he's a lich already. The Thayans know. I mean, yeah, well, he's a Zolkir of necromancy. He's the pinnacle of necromantic magic. We probably don't, he's probably spooky, but like he's not going to overthrow an undead coup. Well,
Zaztan.
That's Zaztan.
Did this feel like the D&D movie? Was this the D&D movie? Because we talked about this a little bit before we all saw it. We were like, what makes a D&D specific movie? Is this that movie for you?
That is a hard question to answer in the world of endless franchising. But if I'm pretending it's 20 years ago, right, and we're only going to give one movie for this entire property, would I be happy with this movie? Yeah, it hit all the right notes for a D&D movie. It had the adventure, it had the jokes, it had the Forgotten Realms, it had the classes, it had a lot of little references. I loved it. Yeah.
This was the D&D movie for D&D and not D&D players. And you can say it wasn't because it didn't do everything right, but you are not understanding what the movie was meant to be. If you say that this was the D&D movie, and hopefully we'll get different flavors of D&D entertainment going forward.
Well, we do live in a world of constant franchise. And I think I'm going to say this is a D&D movie. I don't think it's the D&D movie. But, I think it's great. I think it's imperfect, but I think it's great. I think it's great fun. I think it did a good job of being D&D, but I don't think it's the D&D movie. I also don't know whether there can be the D&D movie. What we might get is, for a weird comparison, something like, I think the Ninja Turtles would be something to strive for, because every generation thinks that the version of Ninja Turtles they grew up with is the best one. Kids who watched Ninja Turtles in the 80s think that's the best one. I think that the 2000s one was the best one. Kids after that loved that one. Every single generation has loved their Ninja Turtles the most. I think that's something worthy of striving for, something that can change shape and look different, but it can mean as much to each new sort of gathering.
The last generation of D&D moviegoers got screwed then. I think that
we did not think that our movie was the best movie. I can assure you.
Speaking of which, I cannot wait. And I would, there is definitely a universe in which this happens. Jeremy Irons comes back into a sequel to this movie, playing the character he played in the original D&D movie in the Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man style redemption of that character.
Do it, James. Do it, James.
Rain from the sky. Nothing in that movie was as good as those 20 seconds of Jeremy Irons vomiting all over the set.
And with that, we will close out this spoiler special edition of the Eldritch Lorecast. Thank you so much to the Twitch chat for joining us. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you for watching as well. You can subscribe to the channel. We have regular episodes of the Lorecast talking D&D news, tabletop news, game design, GM and player advice, all those things every single week. I've been Ben Byrne here with Dael Kingsmill, Shawn Merwin, James Hake, and we look forward to seeing you all again next time. See you then. I ended that sentence on a high and I didn't know where to take it afterwards.
Just a slide at a children's playground.